Okay, so today we begin with chapter 23, verse 16. That's Leviticus, if you don't know. I'm going to back up to 17. We're picking up with 18. I'm going to back it because it's just kind of something, just in case it'll help us to understand the next verse. So here was my translation of 17. You shall bring from your dwellings 2 loaves of bread made of 2 tenths measure of flour, and as best as we know, that's a fistful, i.e., a cup to a cup and a quarter, depending on how big your fist is, I guess. And this is the fist of a grown man, not of a woman, so they do tend to be bigger, but roughly a cup. So you bring 2 loaves of bread made of 2 tenths measure of flour. They shall be baked with chametz, so you have to put leaven in it. That's what that means. They, speaking of the loaves of bread, are the bikurim. They are the first fruits. The 2 loaves of bread are the first fruits. So the first fruits offering has nothing to do with a harvest festival. Anyway, it says they are the first fruits to Yahweh. All right, so let's take a look at verse 18 where we begin. Ooh, it's a long one. A very, very little English translation would be, and bring you upon the bread 7 sheep complete, children year and young steer, son herd, and rams 2, the number 2, be they burnt offerings to Yahweh, and gifts and drink offerings, their fire scent soothing to Yahweh. All right, so we're taking off with vaYiqra Rav Tim. I did way overemphasize the syllables there on purpose. I do that on purpose. Literally, that would be it would mean and make come you, right? Well, what does that mean? Bring. You bring something. This is all, which is on or upon. Ha lechem, the bread. Lechem, the bread. You're not literally going to set this stuff on top of the bread. I hope you know. All right, so this is Shabat. That's the number 7. Kevasim, 7 sheep. Really, you're going to make these 2 loaves of bread that are, what, that big? I don't know if I can make you guys, something like that. You're going to set 7 sheep on top of them? Let's not take the, it's not written literally, okay? No, none of it. Anyway, so 7 sheep, and then it says meeting. When it says that, it's saying perfect, whole, unblemished. So 7 pure, let's say pure sheep. Why do I use the word complete? Well, it isn't a good word. Pure, not ever really a good word in English for something in Hebrew. It just isn't. Our language, the English language, is so completely different than the Hebrew language, and the particularly the thinking process and all of that. The Hebrew language of the Bible, not of modern Hebrew, but of the Bible, was what we call a primitive language, not an old language. I mean, technically it does, but when we say primitive language, we're talking about a language that uses very few words, and each of those words are going to tend to have many different meanings or applications. But only one of those meanings, i.e., applications of that word, is going to connect to the sentence. And that's the mistake that so many Bible commentators have been making for so long. They connect it to the wrong meaning, they connect it to the wrong application, or they connect it to multiple meanings and applications, which is never right. You don't know that there's grammar rules. And then you've got college professors saying, well, we don't know what the grammar rules are. Well, I'm sorry you're so uneducated. But yes, we do know. Anyway, there's a verse, this is to say something for the Christians. There's a verse in the New Testament, and I'm not real good with that whole English. I don't read I have translated the entire New Testament, but I translated the Greek. I didn't translate the English, so I'm not real good with the English part of it. But it said something about moving on to perfection. And you hear these people say, well, Jesus was the only perfect. That you're calling God Almighty if you say, because God Almighty himself, that guy that all his stuff got stolen and his kids died and his horrible wife said, why don't you curse God and die? You know that story? This word. It wasn't enough that he said it once, he said it twice. You say Jesus was the only perfect man? You're calling God a liar. Back time, essentially, now I'm going to have to say, kind of pad this a little bit. Essentially, 50 different people utilizing the Hebrew Bible, which is what the Christians call the Old Testament, and the what everybody calls the New Testament. I put those two together and found 50 occurrences of somebody either being called perfect or being told to be perfect. And you run around saying, oh, Jesus is the only perfect person. How can we have this discrepancy? God's calling other people perfect. Other people are calling themselves perfect or calling other people in the Bible perfect. How is it that, someone like David could be a womanizer, an adulterer, and a murderer and wind up king of a nation and also be called perfect? Because he's one of them. See, we conflate the word perfect with flawless. Everyone knows that without doubt, Yeshua, if the one that Christians call Jesus, if he was the physical image of the invisible God, in other words, if he was, and of course would remain, my computer's doing something weird again. If he is who everyone said he was and who he obviously said he was, then he actually is the only flawless human being who has ever lived, right? But if he's not, then there's never been a flawless human being. And that's what's being conflated here. Because biblical perfection, when we apply it to human beings, is only said of those of us, I'm going to include us because we do this, is only said of those of us who obey the law of God. Now, those of you who run around saying, oh, I follow the rabbinic and I follow Rashi and I follow Maimon, no, you're not perfect. You don't fit this description. Because just look at the teachings. The vast majority of them say the opposite of what God's law says. And if you're okay with, saying, well, these guys were so brilliant and so smart that they usurped God, which is in the Talmud, it does say that more than once, then good for you, but don't call yourself perfect. So the perfection is never flawless. So if we misapply the perfection of a sheep, what happens? We begin to reject sheep that are perfect, that are perfectly fine for the sacrifice. Just because the sheep has the let's say, a scar on it, does not mean that that sheep should be rejected. Just because that sheep is not pure white from head to toe does not mean that sheep should not be counted. Because the red heifer is not entirely perfectly smoothly red does not mean that we have to wait until it shows up before we can have a red heifer. Because the conflation of flawlessness with biblical perfection has messed up a lot of minds. I'm just going to throw that out there. All right. Then the next thing it says is B'nai, I'm pretty sure. Oh, no. I was thinking it's going to say something else. So it says these 7 sheep. Then it says B'nai Shana. So it's 1 year old. And again, there's the argument of it has to be either exactly 1 year old, which gets ridiculous, or it can only be between 8 days old and 1 year old, or it can only be from the point it turns 1 year old till the day it turns 2. Okay. A 1 year old, biblically speaking, is anything from birth until the beginning, what we would call today, until its second birthday. You'll think of it that way, you know what a 1 year old anything is in the Bible. Okay, then we followed that with ufar, which is they've added the u that to make and. So it's and what's a far? Well, it's a young steer. What do they mean by young steer? Well, they're actually, let me look ahead of here. Well, I was thinking there was going to be a Hebrew word there that is not there. So let's make a different connection here so that I won't steer you wrong. So the far means steer, and that's followed by ben, so a young steer. What do they mean by a young steer? They mean a steer that is from the day of its birth until its second birthday is a young steer. It's the same thing. It's just said in a different way. Okay. Then that's followed with makar. So it's from the herd. It's not supposed to be that you own 7 sheep and that's it, and you own 1 steer and that's it. And they all live in their own little pit. No, they take it from the herd, indicating that it's assumed that you're going to have a lot more than that, that you're not taking the only animals that you have, you're taking them from the herd. And so if you don't have a herd where you can take this from, there are other rules about you can give, 2 pigeons, 2 turtle doves. I think the idea that pigeon is acceptable is a little out there, but I don't see it violating the law. So I just don't know if I would ever, no matter how poor I was, just offer God a pigeon. I would really have to be desperate. But anyway, so you take it is that this is somebody who has the ability financially to do this. Well, who are we talking about here? We're talking about the priest here, because these are the animals that are going to cover the entire nation of Israel. It's not just for a single person. Okay? And then it says echad, so it's one. One from the herd. Just go with that. This is ve'elim because that's in plural. And rams. We have 7 sheep. We have 1. And rams, so it's going to be sheep with the horns, you know? As far as I'm concerned, it's the same animal. And so then it says Shanagim, so it's two rams, because that's the number two. Uh, well, the two, all of that stuff now, we're summing up. All of that, they will be Olah. They will be for a burnt offering. Olah is um, burnt sacrifice or burnt offering are truly the right translation for that word because it's of the thing that has been uh, killed, it's been skinned, it's been cut up, and the parts that you don't eat have been separated, everything's been cleaned, and now you're setting them on the barbecue. The part that you actually cook for the purpose of eating, that's in this. So you're going to cook it, and God's going to sit there and eat all that food. It's not just going to be burned. Christians like to, there's a way that they say it. They give their gifts as unto God. You hear that in the Christian circles a lot. That's exactly what's being said here. It's not saying that you're doing this and God's going to eat it, or you're doing this strictly for God. No, this is actually for the priest. And it's already made all this clear earlier in this same chapter. So when you're doing this, you're doing it as unto God. You're obeying God. And in doing so, this feeds God's priest. And it's ultimately, in this case, going to cover you over for your sin, which is going to make God very happy. And it's actually going to say that in this verse. And min chatam. So after all of that stuff, then it says now you're going to give. Only you got to bring lots of. There's going to be a whole lot of people here, and if everybody brings one, it's still going to be in plural because it's lots of gifts. You're more than welcome to. If all you can give is one, little coin that 1/100th of a dollar bill or something, if that's truly all you have, then you're giving all you have, right? So that's a big offering. Totally. You gave the one little coin that was all but worthless, uh, gave everything she had to give. The other guys were showing off and making their little coins spin around what they call the trumpet, the thing you put your money in. If you hit it just right, the thing would spin around. Got real pretty sound. Not so pretty if you're putting, or not brass, but just like, well, it must have been brass. But the higher up you went, when you put silver in, the sound got sweeter. When you put gold in, it got very sweet. You could tell the difference. You knew what was being offered if they were spinning it around the trumpet. Some of you Christians will get that. All right, so then it's Venis Kechem, and that's a drink offering. It's a libation. It's literally of pouring wine. And so you get the idea that they're taking this wine and just pouring it on. If you take wine and put it over, is it the griddle, the one that's flat, Donna, that like you do pancakes on a griddle, right? Now if you pour it on there, what's going to happen is go shh, it's going to make that, and as long as it's hot and all that. And so everybody gets this idea that that's what this is. Well, it could be. Obviously, that would do that, but you have a flat griddle. The altar was not made with a flat griddle. So what, they're just going to dump it onto because it had remember, it was described as mesh, a wire, a mesh work. Just think of your barbecue today. It'd be something like that, right? So if you pour a offering over that, what's going to happen? Not a lot. You might even put the fire out if you pour enough. Although that would be alcohol abuse, right? Anyway, joke a friend of mine told me once. But then they think this mainly because the next word is ish, ishe, the sound of fire. But so certainly you could do that if you had a flat griddle, which they did not. No, they never did. There is no flat griddle in any part of the temple. The tabernacle, first or second, there's never been one of those. So why do they do this? I don't know. There are things I've read, from the Second Temple period that sound like they did something like that, but it never explained where or how. Whether that's how that went, I don't know. My guess here would be offering is that it's kind of like a toast. All gonna pour a little in a cup, drink it. To me, that would make way more sense. I don't have a thing against on something. That's what you want to do. Just do it. And if you think, oh well, it says ish after that, so let's just pour it on the fire. Oh, okay. But you know what happens with Isha if we're talking about human beings or speaking of God in a anthropomorphic way, as if he was human. That word turns to passion, doesn't it? A little wine, a little passion, just saying. And then it says, Reach Nihoach, a sweet scent. You guys remember what that is? This is La Yahweh. So this drink, this fire, this passion, it is, there's no way you could look at the Hebrew and say that it's not of the people toward God and that it's not of God toward the people. I don't see how you could read the Hebrew text and not see that. So here's my translation. And you shall bring with the bread 7 unblemished sheep of the first year, 1 young cow, and 2 rams, a burnt offering to Yahweh, and your mincha, your donations, and your niske, your drink offerings, either with fire or they are the fire. Anyway, a drink offering with passion, a reach nihoach, I just don't know how to translate this where it truly makes sense. It is the pleasure in God knowing that his children are covered. That's what we call a soothing scent, or a scent soothing, depending on how you put that together. And it's to Yahweh. So this is the bringing of the animals to be offered up so that the priests have food to eat. Bringing your bread that's called the first fruit offering with it. If you bringing an offering, also we'll go to the priest. God doesn't need your money or things. Also, and then in doing this, your obedience to God is showing your feelings about God. So if you're offering story of there was these two brothers, and one of them brought up just that's good enough, and the other one of his passion. Got that one out a little bit, didn't they? Okay, let's go on to 19, and again, this is very literal. And do them he goats, she goats, one to sin offering, and two lambs, children year, to sacrifice peaceful. Okay. So this is the same sentence. We haven't gone on to another sentence. This is literally the same sentence. So you have va'asitem, that's to labor, to manufacture, to do stuff. So we can just put the word do, D-O. Oh, sometimes we use the word make, M-A-K-E, make an offering, do the work necessary, right? This is our word for that in Hebrew, much bigger than our English word, right? But same thing. Then we have se'ir. That's a he goat. That's a hairy goat. And then it's izim. That's a she goat. Could be hairy or not, I guess. Then we have echad. That's the word for one. In this case, I mean, it has a lot more deeper meaning and all that, but for this sentence, it's just one. Lechatat. Oh, you caught that right. It's for a sin sacrifice. Chatat. You read the meaning of this word in a lexicon or something like that, particularly if you're Christian. One of the things that it almost always says is to sin, which is to wander from or stumble from the path. You get that. A lot of them will talk about shooting the arrow and missing the mark and yak, blah, blah, blah. No, it is. And there was a Yehudim Rav who lived in the Second Temple period. He wrote a single verse that found its way into the New Testament that I tell you all the time. If you're Jewish, you need to memorize this verse. You need to. This is a verse that anyone who claims to love God, every one of us who do love God, or at the very least claim such love, all need to learn this, to memorize it and have it at the ready. Because when Christians start after Jews about something biblically, we'll quote this to them. And for the Christians, when you start talking to me about how God doesn't even have the right to tell you what to do because Jesus washed all that away, I'm going to throw this at you, right? It's found in 1 John, so think of it as 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. 1, 3, 4. 1 John chapter 3, 4. Everyone who commits sin is also in rebellion of the Torah. If you're a Christian, you're probably going to read the word law. But go around and get some other Bible translations, because some of them actually do say Torah. They should, because that's the word that was translated as nomos, I think, in Greek. Everyone who commits sin is also in rebellion of the Torah, because sin is Torah rebellion. Sin is Torah rebellion. So if you ask a Christian what sin is, depending on what flavor of Christianity they are, you're going to hear everything from, all drinking and cussing and smoking and carousing around with women. You know, they used to actually say that when I was a teenager, carousing around with women. And the Pentecostal holiness, when I was younger, if you put your finger on the edge where your ear touched your skin, you put your finger there. If the hair touched that finger, you were going to hell because you were a sinner. Because they felt like you had to have what we teenagers called white walls. You had this big white carved out area. Your skin was really white under there. And so we call them white walls. But if it was like that and it touched the collar on the back of your shirt, you had to go to the first, you had to go get your hair all shaved off, and then you had to come back on Sunday and ask God for his forgiveness and please to, save your soul again. And they just had the women, they had to wear their dress sleeves, had to come down just past this knobby part on your, what's that called? Wrist, on both of them, of course, all the way down to your ankles. Your dress had to go all the way down to the ankles, and it had to come up and touch the bottom of your neck. This is how strict almost all of Christianity used to be. And by the time I grew up, it was just one or two sects of Christianity who did that. And they would call that sin. And if you were if you didn't show up to church on Sunday, you had sinned. So they just kind of made up what sin is and what it wasn't, right? Because it seemed to me growing up, especially in my teen years, that the guys that had a lot of money could live any way they wanted to, and they were always right with God, no matter what they were doing. And those of us who were teenagers and stumbling and stammering through this thing, finding out that was a sin after you did it, because no one ever told you, because it was never written down anywhere. So I think you get what I mean. Well, Yochanan, this guy they call John, wrote this out, and it tells you exactly what sin is and exactly what sin is not. Everyone who commits sin is also in rebellion of the Torah, because sin is Torah, rebellion. So, to put it real clear, if the Torah tells you to do something and you don't, that is Torah rebellion, i.e., that is sin. If the Torah tells you not to do something and you do it anyway, that is Torah rebellion, that is sin. And we can take it one step beyond that, which I always do. It does not make any difference how appalled you may be by some action. Let's just call it, let me think of something here. Or some of the other ones. I always use that one. I want to use something else. Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I was looking for something ridiculous. The whole cutting of the hair thing. The man has to have the white wall around his ear, and the back of it can't touch the top of his shirt. You're just appalled at somebody like me. Can y'all see that? All right, yeah. You're appalled by that. You think a man ought to have his face shaven clean, and so I'm appalling to you. I'm not a sinner. Right? It doesn't make any difference how appalled you are by some behavior or something, whatever. If the Torah does not call it a sin, it is not a sin. If the Torah calls it a sin, or it is, period. So if you learn what the Torah says, then beyond a shadow of a doubt, how to live without sin. And it's actually not as hard as you would think. Even Jesus said that the yoke was easy and the burden was light. He was talking the yoke, that's the Torah. Hello. So anyway, let's move on. We have ushene, so and two, number two. Ushene chevasim, that's lambs. So and two lambs. B'nai, children of, what am I going to say? Shana, of course. 2 1-year-old lambs. Then it says le zevach. That's actually, you're going to slay 2 lambs. You're literally going to kill them and cut them up and stuff. That's what zevach is. That's what it means. Then it says shelamim, which is the word peace in plural. Because there's going to be a lot of sin being covered. I don't use the word forgiven. It's that word should never be found in a Bible. It's not forgiven, it's covered. Anyway, here's my translation. And make one hairy goat for Torah rebellion, for sin. One of them is for the sin offering. Well, leave the word offering out, that's not it. And make one goat for sin or sacrifice. You remember that word do and all that? You're doing something, so we could actually use the word sacrifice. Sacrifice one hairy goat for sin, 2 sheep, 2 1-year-old sheep for pieces offering. So one of them is for the sin offering, that's the hairy goat, and the other 2 are for the peace offering. Onkelos' vaYiqra by Drazina Wagner says the following. Chapter 3 discusses the sacrifice called shelamim, unlike the burnt offering discussed in chapter 2. This sacrifice was not totally consumed on the altar. Only certain specifically identified fats were burned on the altar fire. Unlike the mincha offering discussed in chapter 2, which could only be eaten by the priest, the shelamim, the pieces offering, was shared by the altar, the priest and the people making the sacrifice. So what he just said, because I read just the way it was written, what he just said is that one sacrifice is only for the priest. And then they're a little off on this, not the whole thing is put on the altar. They're right about that in that, you don't put the nasty parts you're supposed to get rid of, so not all of it goes on the altar. And then there's parts of the fat that you would normally get rid of that wind up on the altar this time. But it makes it sound like they're saying no part of the meat's being cooked. Well, if that's true, how are the priests and the people going to eat it, right? So it's not that they're wrong. I shouldn't have said it that way. It's that what they said, it's a little confusing. So anyway, they say that the priests are going to eat part of it, and then the priest and the people, the shelamim, was shared by making the sacrifice. So then they go on. We do not know the precise meaning of the noun shelamim, and ancient, medieval, and modern Bible commentators offer different definitions. These include peace, well-being, completeness, vows, shared offering, concluding sacrifices, covenant sacrifices, again, reconciliation, and agreement. So because these guys apparently were not trained on how to take a word back to its root and find the image, why they would make a statement like that's a little beyond me, but apparently a lot of people had a problem with a word that we think of in singular as being plural. Maybe that's what. So they go on. The term zebach in the Bible is derived from the verb meaning to slaughter. We had that. It is used sometimes to denote sacrifices in general. It's always used to slaughter, or at least should be. However, it is also utilized to indicate the Shelemim sacrifice alone. It is occasionally combined with Shelemim as Zevach Shelemim. Shelemim. Whenever the biblical text reads Zevach Shelemim, or only the first or only the second word, the Pentateuchal, that's the first 5 books of the Bible, Targums, and Targum Jonathan to the prophet substitute the holy sacrifices. That's how they don't translate it, the holy sacrifices. They substitute, they take the words out and put the new words in. Exodus 32:6 is an exception since the text speaks of the golden calf, which scriptures considered unholy. Onkelos has only nichsan, which means sacrifice, in his. The Targumists may have retained the Hebrew noun for the other sacrifices because they felt that these nouns expressed the offerings' divine purpose, while Shelemim's meaning was overly broad and possibly confusing, or as we indicate in the introduction, the Onkelos translator may not have wanted to turn his translation into a commentary by explaining the details of the sacrifice. But wait, there's more. The Kyle and DeLuch commentary to the Hebrew Bible says the following: the real meaning of the peace offering is sacrificial slaughtering or slaughter. It is sometimes used in a wider sense and applied to every kind of bleeding sacrifice. And this again, 1 Samuel 1:22-19, especially in connection with mincha. But it is mostly used in a more restricted sense and applied to the peace offering or slain offerings, which culminated in a sacrificial meal, as distinguished from the burnt and sin offerings, in which case it is synonymous with Shelemim or Shelemim Zevach. The word Shelemim, the singular of which Shelem, is only met with in Amos 5:22, is applied exclusively to these sacrifices and is derived from shalem, to be whole or uninjured. The plural denotes the entire round of blessing and powers by which the salvation or integrity of man in his relation to God is established and secure. The object of the Shelemim was invariably salvation. Remember, I'm quoting from these guys, these Christian guys. Sometimes they were offered as an embodiment of thanksgiving for salvation already received, sometimes as a prayer for the salvation desired, so that they embraced both supplicatory offerings and thank offerings, and were offered even in times of misfortune or on the day on which supplication was offered for the help of God. The law distinguishes 3 different kinds: praise offering, vow offerings, and free will offerings, as you can find in chapter 7. They were all restricted to oxen, sheep, and goats, either male or female, pigeons not being allowed, as they were always accompanied with a common sacrificial meal for which a pair of pigeons did not suffice. So they're saying that the pigeon could not be offered in place of the Shelemim offering. To say that you don't know what this word means puzzles me. It's shalom. That's your word, shalom. Shalom aleichem, peace to you. May whatever is important to you is important to God and vice versa. May you always be following God's will. I don't understand myself all of this confusion. I mean, even what they wrote was confusing because they're trying to, I think, turn it into something that it's not. They're trying to make this about salvation, i.e., the Christian idea, at least the Deluge guys was. But the things that Moshe did, he committed murder. He's still a murderer. David, womanizer, adulterer, murderer, all of that's still true about him. He did not go as far as the east is from the west. It's still with him. It's still in the book, still talking about it anytime you read it in the book, right? That's not, I'm not disagreeing with the New Testament verse at all because it is correct. If it's understood properly, if it's translated, that you truly understand what's happening here. We are not forgiven of a sin and therefore it didn't happen. Right? You are what you did. And it's never going to go away. You can go back in time and change it. Every human being can think of something that, of all the things in my life that I could change. If I could go back, I'd change that one thing. But then you'd be scared to because with that you wind up not even being who you became. So I think it's a dumb idea to go back in time, but whatever. And make one hairy goat for a sin offering. So this offering is being offered up with all the things that have been done wrong, all of the breaking of God's law. God said that a man can't cut his beard. If you did, whoop, you need a. God said, wear the fringe, and you didn't. You need a sin offering. And what does that do? Make it go away? Well, okay, let's say you shaved your face off, so they go make the sin offering, and as soon as it's done, your beard's back. No. This idea that it goes away is so wrong. It's a covering. It's all it was ever supposed to be was covering. The reason why Moshe could be a murderer and then lead the children of Israel out of Egypt over toward the promised land and give God's children the owner's manual to life is because the sin he was guilty of was covered. And that's what happens in these, when it gets to the point that the sin sacrifice has been made, the peace sacrificing, the celebration, it's twofold. It's the celebration of knowing that our God has made a covering for us. And it's a celebration of God knowing that we are covered. Okay, this may be pushing it, but I'm going to try. Let's go on to verse 20, very literal again. And make wave the Cohen with them upon bread, the first fruits. You shall wave 2 faces Yahweh. Upon 2 sheep, holy be they to Yahweh the Cohen. Okay, this is going to clarify something I said earlier. The Hanif, that's to make wave, to shake the hand. This word. So those of you who saw me make that offering here recently, you saw everything was on a plate, and I lifted it up like this, and I turned in all the different directions. There is no actual commandment saying that that's how it's to be done, but I do know from the documentation that we have from the period that is how it was done. So that's the way I do it, because those guys are pretty smart, and they definitely spoke Hebrew better than I did. So anyway, this is, you're going to wave HaKohen, well, wave. That's the priest. Otan, which just them. Al, that's the word on, something that's over, above something. It's even used of motion upon or over the upper part of a thing or place, or upward from a lower place. Anyway, what is it that you're going to do that with? The bread. All right, you're gonna wave the bread. Then it says Habi Kurim. So you're gonna wave the bread of the first fruits. Tenifa, that's shall wave. The waving, the shaking of the hand is the same word. Lipne, so you're gonna wave the thing, and it says you will. Now we're like put a comma there in your mind. And it says you're going to wave lipne. Now that's to the faces. So it's in front of or in the presence of is how we say that in English. Yahweh. And do this in God's presence. And it says all, which is above or upon, shine or shine, the number 2, kevasim, the 2 sheep, kodesh. Now that's the word for holy. Yiyeh, they are holy. The 2 sheep are holy. La Yahweh. You could say they're holy to Yahweh. In other words, he sees that as holy. Or you can read it, they are holy for Yahweh. Either way, in Hebrew, that there is no distinction between those two thoughts. Then it says La Kohen for the priest. So they are waved. These 2 sheep are now holy, being waved before God, and they will be for, in other words, the Kohen are going to eat them. That's what they mean by La Kohen, for the Kohen. So a translation, boy, it went a lot faster than I thought it would. And the Kohen, speaking of the priest, and the Kohen will wave the bread of the first fruits upward. They shall wave before Yahweh over the 2 lambs. And given this is a possibility. So you got the 2 lambs, they're laid out. They've been, hopefully at this point they're cooked like they're supposed to be, and they're laid out. And then you wave the bread over the top of the sheep, or maybe the sheep are on the platter with the bread. Ooh, boy, you'd need Hercules for that, right? So the waving it above would make more sense. Or perhaps maybe you take the 2 very small loaves of bread and maybe cut a little bit of the meat and put it on a platter and do it, which would make a lot of sense. Again, how we do that is not specific. You know why? Because God doesn't care. He did. He was specific about everything that was important. All right, so you're going to wave this before Yahweh, or maybe over the lambs, or with parts of the lambs. But then after that, it's the priests are holy to Yahweh, is a possibility, or the lambs are holy and are for the priests. You could say any of those, you could put it any of those ways, and all of them would be correct. Saadia wrote that the Kohen only had to wave the breast and the leg because the entire animal was too heavy to wave. Yeah, think about it. It was 2 animals, not just 1. Why not just wave a single slice? I'm old and riddled with degenerative bone disease and I'm talking about myself here. I am old and riddled with degenerative bone disease and other various arthritis throughout my entire body. The breast and leg are too heavy for even me. I have to help. I have I have the help of modern medicine, and the Kohanim did not. Uh, were the old and disabled Kohanim supposed to stop doing their job? Of course, you say they have blemishes. Okay, what happens when there aren't enough Kohanim to take up the slack? See, at some point, you got to realize that when we're trying to push things to their most ridiculous, literal end, we've lost the whole point. And the whole point is that you're bringing these sacrifices in obedience to God's request that you do so. And through that, your sin, your flaws, and all the things that you do wrong are going to be covered over by God, which should make you happy. But it also makes God happy. Rashi argued that both sheep had to be weighed while still alive. Oh, good luck with that. What city boy? I can't see anything going wrong with that idea. Could you imagine lifting all those animals for 8 hours straight? Have to raise 7 unblemished sheep, 1 cow, 2 rams, and whatever is done, and a drink offering, and don't forget all that bread because everybody's bringing 2 loaves, right? Both are have utterly placed their opinion on a terrible translation. Is perhaps the wheat had to be weighed. I personally like to place a strip of cow, steak, and 2 strips of lamb on the plate with the bread. Notice also that this is not the end of the sentence, but I'm out of time. Shalom, shalom, everyone.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.